Hello all. Hope you all are enjoying these e-learning classes. Class 12, as you know that in our last session we were discussing the story to build a fire. Let's start this story with a short introduction of the author of this story. So, dear students, this story is penned down by Jack London. And Jack London has his nickname John Griffin London. Basically, Mr. Griffin London was an American novelist, journalist, and a social reformer. He was a pioneer in the world of commercial magazine fiction. And you know that he was one of the first writer. He was one of the first writer to become a worldwide celebrity and earn a large fortune from his writing. He was born January 12, 1876 at San Francisco and died November 22, 1916 at California. He wrote a lot of short stories, many short stories, where some stories are The Law of Life, A Piece of Steak, The Mexican, and the story and the great story that we are studying right now, To Build a Fire. Basically, this story has two versions, one published in 1902 and the other in 1908. The version that was written in 1908 is read up by all right now. We are reading that version. While the first version of the same story that was written in 1902 was less known to all. Let's start this story now. This story is all about a man. This story is all about a man, the pride of a man, the overconfidence of a man. Here in this story, a solitary hiker sets out on a sojourn with only a wolf dog as a companion to the base camp. The story takes place in Klondike region of the Yukon Territory in Canada, where temperature falls to 75 degrees below to zero. He leaves early in the morning and expects to reach the camp to meet the boy by 6:30 in the evening. Isn't it the terrible thing, terrible expectations? Of course it is. Despite he continued his journey despite the warning from an old-timer from Sulphur Creek about the weather. He has only one companion with him, the dog. And the dog follows him even though all its instinct tells it to do otherwise. As you all know that animals have some specific qualities in them as they know very well what would be the next step of nature. So in spite of neglecting all the thing, in spite of neglecting the foretelling of the old creek, he continues his journey. The dog follows him even though he knows that it is very terrible to walk in that cold weather, to travel alone in that terrible cold weather. It had to follow him. When the man stops for lunch, he builds a fire that gives a warmth to the dog and the man as well. After a little while, shortly after resuming his walk, the man accidentally falls into a concealed spring. He gets soaked up to his shins. His hands and feet go numb and he is reminded of the words of old-timer from Sulphur Creek. He removes his mittens and unties his moccasins. And when he unties his moccasins, it is very difficult for him. It has become very difficult for him to remove all these things. Actually, his feet and hands went numb. He gathers wood to build a fire around pine trees. He takes twigs directly from the tree and ends up shaking the tree, causing the snow on the boughs to fall down and extinguish his steady fire. He tries again, but the matchbox falls from his hands and 70 matchsticks fall into the snow. His hands and feet were so numb that he gathers the twig and matches using the heels of his hands. It was such a misfortune of that man. He was such unfortunate that he believes that he is more powerful than nature. He lights all 70 at once and tries to light the fire but ends up extinguishing it. But as happened with all, a crazy idea grooves his mind. He is reminded of a story of a man who killed a bull and crawled into the carcass for warmth. He decides to kill the dog in the hope that he can warm his hands. He starts to panic and decided to run to the base camp. Actually, he doesn't have the endurance. He was running. He's running and running, but he doesn't have the endurance. So he stumbles several times and falls twice. After the second fall, he realizes the inevitability of death. He stops fighting and decides to face the death with dignity. In his last moments, he remembers the word of the wise old timer. At last, he imagines that the boys will come looking and take his dead body away. He falls into a slumber and slips into the death. All this while, the dog looks at him quizzically. Actually, the dog has never seen anyone remain so still in this terrible cold. Soon he realizes that the man has gone. So it immediately runs back where he could have more food provided, more fire provided. This story tells us about the pride of a man. A man often wants to control the nature, but he forgets that nature is a formidable enemy and the best friend of the man. So, the theme of the story is survival. I think survival should be the central theme of this story, as the man tries and fails. Man tries and tries again and again, but he fails to stand up. So survival is the main theme of this story. And the next point that I get reading of this story is pride. The pride of a man. As you know now, that young mariner's pride got to the best of him as he headed out into the cold against the advice of a more seasoned mariner who told him never travel alone in the temperature lower than 50 degrees below zero. But he thought that he could beat the cold and headed out towards the goal. This story tells us that if a man is wise, it is good. But if a man is overconfident, it is very, very bad. Man cannot overcome the nature. As you know, that corona disease, we cannot fight. We cannot overcome. Yes, but sorry, we can fight, but we cannot overcome. Precaution is better than cure. So, for now, we have only the summary and the theme of the story. And in our next part, we'll be discussing the explanation and the question of the story. Till then, goodbye to all. God bless you all.